Okay, so let's look over our worksheet. Right? I'm going to do number 2 here by creating a table of values for f of x is equal to 1 over x squared. This is one of our basic rational functions. Okay, so when I plug in 0, we get 1 over 0 squared, which is just 1 over 0, and this function is undefined. Okay. Clearly that happens over here as well. Okay. So what that means is that we will have a vertical asymptote here with the equation of x equals 0. Okay. Now I want to think about what happens when I plug in point 1. Okay. Now it might be helpful to think about point 1 as 1/10. Okay. So if I plug in 1/10, okay, now I'm dividing with fractions. Okay. So that's the same thing as 1 times taking the reciprocal. 10 over 1 is just 10. So 1 times 10 is 10. If we think about this as 1 over 100, okay, then when we plug it in, 1 divided by 1 over 100, right, then inverting and multiplying, we'll get 1 times 100 over 1, which is simply 100, and now the function value has 100. Okay. So this one is 1 over 1,000. And again, inverting and multiplying would be 1 times 1,000, which is simply 1,000. The next one is 1 over 10,000. So again, inverting and multiplying, the function value simply becomes 10,000. Alright, so I hope you can see what's happening here. Okay. Now what's happening with these numbers is if we look at a number line, here's the number 0, here's the number -1, let's say here's 1. Okay. Now 1/10 would be here. Okay. 100th would be even closer. Okay. Then here would be 1 over 1,000, and here would be very, very close to it would be 1 over 10,000. Okay, it's very small. Okay. So what's happening here is that the x values are going to 0, okay, from the right-hand side of 0. And so that's what we notate as this. Okay. So as x is going to 0 from the right-hand side, what's happening to the function values? Well, we go from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000. And I can hope you see that as you get closer and closer to 0, what the function value is doing is that the function value is taking off to infinity. So if here's the point, what point should this be? Well, let's put in one more to make this a little easier. Okay. With 1, we'd put in 1 over 1 and get the number 1. Okay, so this would be the point 1, comma 1. Okay. So now I'm approaching 0 from the right. The function values are taking off to infinity. We can label this then. Let's call this point 1, comma 10. We have a few more in here. Clearly not to scale, 0.01, comma 100. There's another one, 0.001, 1,000. Okay, so that's what's happening on this side. Now what happens as we go, this is number 1 here. Okay, let's see what happens as we take off to infinity. Okay, and what's happening on this portion of the graph. Okay, so to do that, I've put in a few here. So all of these are going to be 1 over. Okay. So we'll get 1 over 2, 1 over 4 1 over 10, 1 over 100, 1 over 1,000. Okay. And so that's equal to, if we want to look at decimals to help with us, this would be 0.5, this is 0.25, this is 0.10, this is 0.01, this is 0.001. Okay. So now we can look at what's happening here. I took values of x that were getting larger and larger and larger, so I'm trying to figure out what will happen as x goes to infinity. Okay. Well, when I do that, what's happening with the function values here? Okay. Well, first we have 1, and then we have half of that, and then we have half of that, then we have 0.1, and 0.01, and 0.001. As we keep going, like if we went to 1,000,000, we'd have 1 over 1,000,000, which is 0.0000, however many O's we need, 1. So what the function is doing is that it is approaching 0. Okay? And so what that means then is that there is also not just a vertical asymptote, but a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. Okay? And so the function's values begin to look like this. Okay? And we could put in some points here. We have 1, 1, so this would be 2 comma half. And someplace out here, let's pick another one, 10 comma 0.1. Okay, so that's what's happening on this side. And now we have to think, okay, what's being asked of us in this second column? Okay. Well, here, what's happening, I have negative 0.10, so negative 1/10, and then negative 1/100. Okay. So that's even closer to 0. And again, negative 1 over 1,000. 1 over 10,000 would be here. Okay. So what we're looking at is that the values that we've picked are going to 0. Now, not from the right-hand side, but they're approaching 0 from the left-hand side. And that's this notation. Okay, so remember this is negative 1 over 10th, and this is negative 1 over 1,000, and this is negative 1 over 10,000. Okay? Alright, so when we put those in the function values, what will happen then is that we have 1 over negative 1/10. Okay. All of these will be 1 over. Okay. This will be negative 1 over 100, negative 1 over 1,000, negative 1 over 10,000. Okay. Oh my gosh, you know what graph I'm making, you guys? This isn't 1 over x squared. I forgot to square everything, didn't I? Okay, so this is, I'm doing 1 over x. Sorry. Otherwise, these would all need to be squared. Okay. Alright, so now, inverting and multiplying. 1 times, 1 times, 1 times. All of these reciprocals. So this is negative 10, negative 100, negative 1,000, negative 10,000. Okay. So in the end, we just get a function value of negative 10, negative 100, negative 1,000, negative 10,000. Okay. So now we can look and say, all right, what's happening to these function values? I have that x is going to 0 from the right, okay, and also let's put in our negative 1 here. If we put in negative 1, we get 1 over negative 1, which is negative 1. Okay. All right, so what's happening to these function values? Well, as x is getting closer and closer and closer to 0, the function is getting more and more and more negative. So we can say that the function values are approaching now not positive infinity, but negative infinity. So let's say this is negative 1. Okay. Then what's happening, this is the point negative 1, negative 1. What's happening as I get closer and closer to 0 is the function is approaching negative infinity. Okay. And we can put in a few points here. So this would be the point negative 0.1 comma negative 10. And down here we could say negative 0.01, that's negative 100, okay, etc., etc., etc. Now let's see what happens as the values of x get more and more negative. By that I mean, what's happening as x goes to negative infinity? Let's see what's happening to the function values. So again, we'll have 1 over all of these. Okay. And we can put in negative 2, negative 4, negative 10, negative 100, negative 1,000. Okay. So this is negative 0.5. If we want to switch it to decimals, negative 0.25, negative 0.1, negative 0.01, negative 0.001. Okay. So we see that we have the same values here. It's just instead of heading in the positive direction, they're heading in the negative direction. And they're heading, so they're heading to 0, in this case, by getting less and less negative. Okay. So the function value is getting less and less negative, and it's still approaching 0. Okay. So how does that look? Well, if the function values are getting less and less negative as I go to negative infinity, less and less negative comes up here, and it approaches 0 now from underneath, the function does. So we could put in some points here. This is the point negative 2 comma 0.5, negative 0.5, and out here let's take like negative 10 or something like this. Negative 10 comma negative 0.1. Okay. And this is the graph of f of x is equal to 1 over x. Okay, so this is our basic rational function. We also on that worksheet had 1 over x squared. Okay, so you'll find different things will be occurring in that graph, but it's a basic shape. Okay, I hope that this explains more about your worksheet. We will start now the lecture in just a moment.